The Houston Cougars are coming off a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament and expected to be great again. But that non-con schedule, it ain't exactly a murderer's row.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shade, and you're joining me at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks so much for making us your first listen or watch, and I want to remind you, you can catch every single episode ad-free on Amazon Music. Special shout out goes out to all the everydayers joining us and all the members of the Locked On College Basketball Discord family. Love to have you guys here. If you want to join in and you're not yet, links in the show notes. It's free to come be part. We'd love to have you in there. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Coming up on the show today, going to be taking a look at a couple teams in red and their non-conference slate. We start in the Big 12 with Houston, which has yet again a not so great non-con schedule. And then we move to Indiana, which makes Houston's look good. And we're going to wrap up the show today by talking about the matchups for the Baha Mar Bahamas event. And man, it's the best slate of teams and coaches they've ever had. That's where we're going today. Going to be super fun. We're starting with Houston's non-con schedule, so I'm actually going to bring it up on screen for those of you watching on YouTube. If you're listening, no worries. I'm going to take you through it as well. Here we go. Starting right in on November 4th. That's a Monday. That's essentially opening day of college basketball, hosting Jackson State. Then that next Saturday, November 9th, Houston will host Auburn, the Battleground 2K24. That's actually at the Toyota Center, the home of the Houston Rockets. Next Wednesday, November 13th, hosting Louisiana. Then 11/22, that's a Friday, hosting Hofstra. And then on a couple days later, on Tuesday, November 26th, playing Alabama. That's Tuesday of Thanksgiving week in the Players Era Festival. That's the first game. They'll be part of the Impact MTE. So Houston taking on both Alabama schools from the SEC. So that'll be a lot of fun. The next day on Wednesday, November 27th, playing either Rutgers or Notre Dame. That's the second game of the Players Era Festival, off on Thanksgiving Day. And then on Friday, the 29th, to play whichever between Rutgers or Notre Dame they didn't play. Remember that the Players Era Festival, it's 8 teams, 2 separate MTEs, and it's more of a round robin. It's not like a bracketed situation. So come home from Las Vegas, off about a week, and then on Saturday, December 7th, Houston will host Butler in the Big 12 Big East battle, and then the final 3 non-conference games, all bye games, all at home. December 10th, that's a Tuesday, against Troy. December 18th, that's a Wednesday, against Toledo. And then Saturday, December 21st, against Texas A&M Corpus Christi. So what are the takeaways from looking at this schedule? Well, overall, you know, we talked so much last year about these Big 12 non-conference schedules and how unsexy really they are overall. And this is yet another one for Houston. Last year, per Ken Palm, their non-conference schedule was 226th in the nation. By virtue of playing both Auburn and Alabama, it might be a little bit better this year, but I don't know that it will crack the top 200. We'll see when everything's said and done. And obviously it depends on how schools go. But as you look, you know, for the Big 12, they have 20 game conference schedules. So they have 11 non-conference games. Of these 11 non-con games, 6 of them are bye games, and they are all at home. Jackson State, Louisiana, Hofstra, Troy, Toledo, and Texas A&M Corpus Christi. And then the other 5 games outside of that, you get Auburn. That's a fun game, but it's not a true campus home game. I love those in the thing. Players Era Festival, look, Houston and Alabama, that is the game of that event. That's knockdown, drag out, going to be the high-level offense against the high-level defense. I cannot wait for that game. But Rutgers, Notre Dame, kind of, I think Notre Dame's going to be better this year than they were last year. Micah Shrewsbury is going to grow that program well. Rutgers obviously brings in two of the top freshmen in the country in Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper. So, they should be better as well. But still, I think Houston is the better team there. I think Houston's non-con is also hurt by their Big 12 Big East opponent being Butler. We'll talk more about that in a second. But then also there are no true road games in this schedule. You get 7 home games, the 6 bye games we talked about, plus hosting Butler in the Big 12 Big East. You get 1 de facto home game playing at the Toyota Center against Auburn, and then 3 neutral site games in the Players Era Festival. And I know different people feel different ways about this. I personally am always of the opinion that it is good for teams to play on the road in non-conference schedule, like true, not neutral site games, true campus environments. And that's what that could have been with Auburn, but it's not. And we've started seeing that more. If you've been tuning into some of these non-conference schedule shows that we've been doing, you've noticed we're getting this a lot more true home and homes between power conference schools. That's not what this Auburn series is. And so I said we'd come back to Houston and Butler being the matchup in the Big 12 Big East. It is a bummer, but you start looking around the Big East and you start looking around the Big 12, and it's like I kind of understand why this happened because of the Big East big schools. You think about Marquette. Well, they're playing at Iowa State. That's a high-level Big 12. Like Iowa State's going to be legit. UConn is hosting Baylor. Obviously, that's another high-level matchup. Creighton is hosting Kansas. And so that takes up the 3 most desirable Big East opponents. But, I would have liked to have seen it been Villanova or St. John's or something like that for Houston. And so that is, nothing that they could control, but that certainly takes away from the luster of this non-conference schedule. As for the Auburn series, it is 2 games, both at neutral sites, both close to, whoever is kind of the home team. So this year's Houston's a de facto home team. Next year, Auburn will be the de facto home team. That game will be played in Birmingham. But again, I talked about last year, Houston's non-conference schedule at KenPom was 226th. You look at the final net rankings last year of the teams that Houston's playing outside of the Players Era Festival. Auburn was 5th. That's great. Butler was 68th. But outside of that, every team finished outside of the top 100 at KenPom last year. Here's the good news, though. Only one of them finished outside of the top 200. That's Jackson State, who was 300th. So outside of that, there's nothing atrocious. Hofstra was 112, Toledo 130, Troy 137, Louisiana 150, A&M Corpus Christi 179. So I think that's the thing, is the reminder that not all mid-majors, not all bye games are created equal. So we'll look at Indiana's here in a second, right? We get a bunch into the 200s on that. And so Houston is kind of in this mid-ground here, where it is a bunch of teams in the 100s for these bye games. So it's not schools that you walk all over, again, outside of Jackson State. But I continue to not buy the argument from a lot of Big 12 schools of, hey, the Big 12 is going to be a gauntlet, so we're going to go easy in non-con. Go look at Kansas's non-con schedule. That thing is loaded. And so I would just like to see more from teams that expect to be really good like Houston. That said, my prediction for this schedule is 9-2 because you've got Alabama, you've got Auburn, and the other 2 Players Era games. I wouldn't be surprised at all if it ended up being 10-1, but I think 9-2 is a very reasonable non-con expectation here. As far as the conference opponents, we know who those will be and where they will be played. But again, we don't know order, specific dates, or specific times. But let me remind you of that. Home and away is Baylor and Kansas and Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, and West Virginia. As you look at all the Big 12 scheduling, if you think of Houston, Baylor, Kansas, Iowa State, and Arizona as like the big 5 this year, with due respect to Texas Tech, maybe BYU, Cincinnati, those 3 as well. And Kansas State, let me throw them in as well, because they've done well in the transfer portal. With those big 5, the tier 1s that I would put them in, each of them has two of the others home and away, one of the others home only, one of the others away only. And so I think the Big 12 has actually balanced this schedule pretty well. And so I gave you the home and aways. Home only is BYU, Cincinnati, Iowa State, TCU, and Utah. And then away only is the Arizona schools, Arizona and Arizona State, UCF, Colorado, and Kansas State. And so we're typically seeing that with the Arizona schools that came in, that they're kind of clumped together like that. So there you go. There's Houston's non-con schedule and just a little peek at the conference schedule. We'll obviously talk more about our top teams as the offseason goes on. Now, if you thought the Houston non-con was iffy, wait till you see what Indiana has on tap. It is not great. We'll get there in just a second. Hey, right after I tell you about game time, going to MLB games in the summer is one of my favorite pastimes. Man, the game, the food, the friends, everything that goes into that experience. And I'm excited to make those all new memories again this summer. And thankfully, when I do so, I don't have to sweat high price last minute tickets, because Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. That makes getting those tickets faster and easier. In fact, as you're looking at prices on the Game Time app, they go down the closer you get to first pitch. So with killer last minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. We just talked about Houston hosting Butler in the Big 12 Big East battle. I found some tickets for that for $99 a piece. Man, keep looking though, because I've got to imagine you're going to be able to find some good deals for that Big East Big 12 battle as we get closer to it. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Let's switch from one red uniformed team to another. We'll talk about Indiana. I wish I had some of those wonderful warm-up pants to wear as we talked about it. Indiana hasn't put out a graphic of their non-con schedule, so I'm not going to pull that up for those of you watching, so everyone just gets to listen to me explain it. If you want, go ahead and look it up, and you can find it as well. We do already have with Indiana's both their exhibition game listed and Hoosier Hysteria, which is like Indiana's Midnight Madness. So that'll be October 18th, a Friday night, Hoosier Hysteria. And then the lone exhibition game for Indiana is Friday, November 1st, Marion. As a reminder, teams can either play 2 exhibitions, 2 secret scrimmages, or 1 of each. So Indiana having 1 exhibition listed tells me that we will learn something about a secret scrimmage at some point along the way for the Hoosiers. All right, let me give you the 11-game schedule for Mike Woodson's team. They're actually not playing on opening day on Monday, November 4th. That's very rare. Almost every non-con schedule I've looked at so far, just about everyone's playing that day. Like, it's going to be easier to talk about who's not playing. And Indiana is one of those schools who will kick off the season on Wednesday, November 6th, hosting SIU Edwardsville. And then Sunday, November 10th, Eastern Illinois. Saturday, November 16th, hosting South Carolina. Thursday, November 21st, hosting UNC Greensboro. And then taking off during Thanksgiving week to battle for Atlantis. As I record this on Tuesday, that the bracket is not revealed. We know the teams. I'll talk about those in a minute. But the reason I say that is because the bracket was revealed a little bit earlier in August last year. So we're waiting on the Atlantis bracket to come out any day now. Hopefully it'll happen this week. And then maybe Andy and I will be able to break that down on Friday's show. So stay tuned for that. But Battle for Atlantis is Wednesday through Friday of Thanksgiving week, 27, 28, and 29th. And so, again, I'll talk about those teams and get to that here in just a second. Coming off of the Atlantis experience, Tuesday, December 3rd, hosting Sam Houston State. And then Friday, December 6th, hosting Miami of Ohio. Then a big gap from December 6th to December 21st. We'll talk about that gap in a second. Hosting UT Chattanooga, and then wrapping up the non-con on Sunday, December 29th, hosting Winthrop. And so what I said about Houston, but more so, Indiana brought in all this talent. They've got back Mackenzie and Baco and others. And so I thought, when I saw Indiana's non-con come out, I was like, man, I hope this team has put themselves in a position where they're going to play some really, really difficult games in the non-con outside of Battle for Atlantis. Because obviously there's going to be some good games at Atlantis. The problem is that it's really kind of not as you start to look at this. And I'm bummed about that because I thought, man, everything that Mike Woodson's team brought in, and you can't use the same argument in the Big Ten that the Big 12 tries to use of like, hey, we got a gauntlet. And not that the Big Ten is bad, but it is not as high level as the Big 12 is. And so all the more so, challenge yourself in the non-conference schedule. I should look back. I don't have where Indiana fell in non-con strength of schedule last year. They were, give me just a second, sorry, 223. So that's right about where Houston was at last year. And I think this non-con schedule is going to be worse than Houston's this year. So let's talk about some more of why. It's just like challenge yourself. And I know part of this, whereas, the Big 12 has the Big 12 Big East Challenge. The ACC and SEC now have the ACC SEC Challenge. Remember, this is now the second year of no Big 10 ACC Challenge anymore, and that was because of all the media rights changing. But last year's non-con, even though it was 223rd or whatever, they had UConn. They had Louisville, and I know Louisville wasn't great again, but at least it's a power conference team. They had Auburn, and they had Kansas. That's 4 high-level major opponents. So that's looking at it. And so let's just look through some of the other takes. I talked about the big gap between Friday, December 6th and Saturday, December 21st. That's because at the last couple of years, the Big Ten has been scheduling some early conference games. In fact, most schools play 2 early conference games. Last year, Indiana played 2 Big Ten games, one on December 1st and one on December 5th. Based on the schedule, it can't be that early this year because you got games on November 29th, December 3rd, December 6th, but there is that 15-day gap. So I'm expecting we're going to get some Big Ten games somewhere between December 6th and 21st, allowing for a finals break in there as well. Looking at this, I said last year there were the 4 high major opponents. This year, South Carolina is the only one on the schedule outside of Battle for Atlantis. And we don't even know that Battle for Atlantis is going to be all high major teams. Again, the bracket's coming soon, but here are the other 7 teams: Arizona, Davidson, Gonzaga, Louisville, Oklahoma, Providence, and West Virginia. So, of those 7 other potential opponents, Davidson and Gonzaga aren't high major. Obviously, we would consider Gonzaga, in there with high major quality teams. So a lot of that's going to be dependent upon how that bracket breaks down. But Arizona is going to be really good. Gonzaga is going to be great. I expect and anticipate that Louisville will be a lot better. Not top 3 in the ACC, but top half of the ACC, I would imagine. Oklahoma's not going to be all that great. Providence will see. West Virginia, we got a new coach coming in Darren DeVries. So it all depends on how he comes in and does, how Tucker, his son, who comes in and is, one of the best scorers in the entire nation. So it's just outside of Arizona and Gonzaga, even that Battle for Atlantis bracket isn't like, wow, that's like the Maui field or something like that. So yeah, it's tough. You look at it with South Carolina. What's interesting about that is the South Carolina game appears to just be a one-off that Indiana's hosting. There's nothing, from everything I've looked up and researched, there's nothing about scheduling a home and home and a return game next year, or that they played last year. They didn't. And so it's like, that's interesting. So we'll see if something else comes of that. But we talked about kind of how subpar this is. Final net rankings of the non-Battle for Atlantis teams last year: South Carolina, 51st. Chattanooga, 140. Sam Houston, 152. Winthrop, 181. That's it in the top 200. Miami of Ohio was 238. SIU Edwardsville, 280. Eastern Illinois, 311. That means if this was last year, outside of whatever the Battle for Atlantis matchups are going to be, this would be 0 quad 1 games in the non-conference portion of the schedule for a Big Ten team that we expect to be good. I just don't get it, and I don't understand it. So prediction, though, you expect it to be good. Like, we're depending on depending on the Atlantis matchups, we're looking at 10-1, maybe 9-2 at worst, unless you lose a game that you just absolutely shouldn't, which could happen. So I would rather have a stronger strength of schedule, a stronger opponent setup, and wind up 8-3 or 7-4 heading into Big Ten play. And again, it's just different philosophies on that. But I'm just always of the mind, you got a good team, load up in your non-con. So we'll see what happens. Conference opponents, let me run you through that really quick. There are, again, 20 of them. 3 home and aways will be Ohio State, Penn State, and Purdue. So that's tough. There obviously Purdue is going to be at or near the top of the Big Ten. I think Ohio State's similar to Indiana. I expect Ohio State to be kind of coming up this year. Home only, Illinois, Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, Rutgers, UCLA, USC. So both LA schools are coming to Indiana. Away only, Iowa, Michigan State, Nebraska, Northwestern, Oregon, Washington, and Wisconsin. So both of the 2 new Big Ten schools from the Pacific Northwest, Indiana will go to. I'm anticipating when we get those schedules that it's going to be similar to what the Pac-12 did, where it's like you go one weekend, probably with Northwestern. I'm assuming you just keep the 2 Indiana schools together. In one weekend, you go play Oregon and Washington, and then flip-flop, and so on and so forth. Same thing. I expect when UCLA and USC come to Indiana, one will play Northwestern, one will play Indiana, and then flip-flop, and then they'll go home. So we'll see. Obviously, this is the first iteration of this, so we don't know, but that's what I'm anticipating when it comes out. The Baha Mar Bahamas event has its best lineup of teams yet, and a great test for 4 of the biggest coaches in our sport. We'll talk about that in just a second. The Baha Mar Bahamas Hoops Championship matchups are set. This event coming up November 21st and 22nd. I believe that is the week before Thanksgiving. Let me look back at the November calendar here. Yes, that's the Thursday and Friday ahead of Thanksgiving week. So there you go with that. And it is 4 great teams. Before I tell you them, let me read you the previous teams that have participated in this event. This is the 4th year of it, started in 2021. 2021, Maryland, Richmond, Louisville, Mississippi State. Not like, whoa, but strong, solid. 2022, DePaul, Santa Clara, Oklahoma State, UCF. And then last year, Miami, Florida, UGA, Kansas State, and Providence. That's the biggest lineup of it. Obviously, a couple of those teams didn't perform as well as we hoped they would. But then this year, listen, keep all those 4 team lineups in your mind and listen to this one. Baylor versus St. John's. Love that. Tennessee versus Virginia. Those teams should all be if things play out how I expect it to, at least 3 of those teams are going to be ranked in the preseason when we get that preseason AP poll. Probably all 4 of them getting votes at least. And then if you are that's the teams, think about these coaches. Baylor and Scott Drew, who thankfully stayed there. St. John's, Rick Pitino. Tennessee, Rick Barnes. Virginia, Tony Bennett. I mean, that is a quartet of coaches that, that's phenomenal. You cannot get much better than that. I don't know that you can get better. You can match it. I don't know that you can get better than that grouping. And so, well done, Baha Mar. Way to just keep growing who you are. And keep in mind, on the 21st, we'll get Baylor, St. John's, Tennessee, Virginia, and then we'll flip-flop and get the winners and the losers the next day. So it's going to be 2 days of really good basketball, really good coaching. I also like these smaller MTEs where we just get 4 teams and do that. I would love to see this be a little bit more of a round robin, similar to like what the Players Era Festival is going to be, because I would love to see all 3 matchups between these 4 teams, but that's fine. But what I like about like a lineup like this is there are no fluff teams, right? You cannot take either game off. It doesn't matter who you're playing. It's going to be good. And, it's good for net rankings. It's good for the sport. And I love it because, I think we often think about these as being specific to Thanksgiving week. I like this one leading into Thanksgiving week. It's like your appetizer for it, but it's a great appetizer. And so, look, and when I think about day 2, I'm not going to complain about either matchup variety, but good grief, give me Baylor and Tennessee. I would love to see that game. But I mean, even Tennessee, Virginia on day 1, we're going to get some great defense. And man, it's just iconic coaches. Wonderful. Now, as you start looking at this as well, we've got to keep wondering, are events like this, like Battle for Atlantis, like Maui Invitational, are they going to be able to continue as it's been? Will they be able to continue attracting top tier teams to come to their events? Or are they, similar to what Players Era Festival is doing, are they going to have to find some NIL tie-ins to stay, to stay afloat? Is Players Era Festival going to be able to, pay out at as high a level as they're promising? All of that is up in the air right now. We're going to have to wait and see on it. But all I know is that Baha Mar is on the come up. Previous to this year, of the 12 total teams they've had, Miami was the only team that was ranked. They were 12th when coming in, and obviously they did not wind up anywhere close to being ranked. And you get this where, depending on how things go in the first couple weeks of the season, all 4 of these teams could be ranked theoretically. And so, man, really, really, really good stuff for the Baha Mar. Congrats on that. All right, gang, that's it for today's show. Great to be together. Thanks so much for tuning in. Would love to hear your thoughts on the Houston non-con schedule, on the Indiana non-con schedule, on this MTE matchup at the Baha Mar. Should be a lot of fun there. If you haven't subscribed to the show on video and audio, would love to have you do that so that you don't miss a second of Locked On College Basketball. If you haven't joined the Locked On College Basketball Discord, we'd love to have you come in there and let's talk about these things together. Again, the link is in the show notes, either audio or video, and it's absolutely free to join this thing. That's right. All it costs is some time and hanging out with us, talking college hoops every day. As always, I want to say apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wildcats, and until tomorrow, peace.